Nicky and Pippa, welcome back to Southampton.
Oh,
It's so good to have you here again with us. About a year later. First of all, how are you both?
Well, it's so good to see you, John. We loved our time in
yes,
Southampton.
we did.
So impressed by what's happening. You're doing an amazing job there.
Oh, thank you. What I wanted to start by asking you is, what could you tell us of the last? It's been a month now that we've been in lockdown. What one high, one low, and one learning from being in isolation? It could be whatever you want.
Low, probably being parted from the family. We're here on our own, so we can't see our grandchildren or our children, which is sad. Or my mum, who's 92. That's hard not to see them. But thank goodness for communication. Thank goodness for being able to do WhatsApp calls and all the rest. But that I suppose is a low. What's your low?
My high is being with Pips, being isolated with Pips 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That's a definite high. I get her undivided attention. That's definitely the high. And learning is learning Zoom.
Yes.
Learning to do Zoom calls, learning technology, learning to film ourselves.
Yes.
Learning just all sorts of technological things which I never bothered with before, but and never thought we were able to do, but
or that we would need it particularly, but now feel we have to learn, we have to change, we have to adapt. The world has changed and we've got to catch up, so desperately trying to catch up in all these things.
And obviously, I mean, you guys have done a great job at HCB of just kind of retranslating everything that happens from kind of, we're a people-focused ministry and now we can't be with people, so having to kind of be very creative. As you look at what's happening today with COVID-19 and the church's response, do you think that as we look back through either in biblical times or in church history, are there things that we can learn from the ways that others have responded, maybe mistakes or things that have gone well? What do you think that we could be learning as we look back about our future?
I mean, this is the first time in the West we've had anything like this, and I think
in our lifetime,
the nearest is, I suppose, the wars, and I think that's why everybody's so shocked, because we feel out of control. But I think anybody who lived through the war, they have a sort of understanding of gathering together, of fighting for a common good, and so I think there is that sort of resilience. I love Captain Tom walking up and down raising money for the NHS. As he turns 100, there is something about the resilience of a 100-year-old doing something like that. So he's a huge example to us. But looking back in church history, there have been plagues, of course, even in the UK, and even across Africa, India. And the church has been the first people to respond. And actually that's a huge challenge. And I think that's something we're learning now, is how do we respond in this time of challenge? The church has always done that. The church, it started hospitals, they started schools, they started everything. And now we've got to reinvent ourselves and get back to that. And I think that's a huge challenge. What actually does God want of the church today? And I think it's quite interesting that probably we're going back to something much simpler of what the church always used to do, of caring for the poor, preaching the gospel and caring for the poor. And that's sort of what the church has always been about. And somehow we've got so busy with so much trappings. I don't know, there's a simplicity of back to the old message, and how brave everybody was. All the missionaries who went off to places where a lot of them died of illnesses and everything. They went out because they had the good news and they wanted to help the communities that they were going to. And that's the challenge to us.
Brilliant, Pips. Very good answer.
What are you going to say? Come on.
Well,
Church history.
Well, I mean, is it church history or the Bible? What is God saying? So on this Sunday, today I want to talk about what was the response in the Bible to a pandemic. It's the same Chinese word. The most Googled Chinese word is a word that occurs in 2 Chronicles 7:13. It's plague, but in Chinese, it's the same word for pandemic as plague. So if you Google the word pandemic, you get 2 Chronicles 7:13, where God said, when a plague happens, this is what you should do. And it's that famous response, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, forgive their sins and heal their land. So what is God saying? I think that's the response. That's the biblical response, is those things. We should humble ourselves. We can't choose very much about what we do. We can't even choose now when we go out. But we can choose to humble ourselves. And humility is, is not thinking less of yourself, but thinking of yourself less. And I think it's one of the challenges for us is to think about others. And actually, I find, for example, when I wake in the night, which I do from time to time in a sort of cold sweat, have I got coronavirus? I start shivering. I think it's the 5th time. It must be the 5th time I got coronavirus. Or I start coughing. I think, oh, that cough, that must be definitely it. And then I can get into a cycle because Pips is, having had lung cancer in November, is in the vulnerable category. And then I start thinking, now if I get coronavirus, then I'm almost certain to give it to her. And if she gets it, and you start getting into this cycle of fear and thinking about yourself. So I find even in the middle of that, if I can discipline myself, now I'm not going to go down that cycle. I'm going to use this as an opportunity to pray for other people, take the focus off myself. Then you sense the fear goes. So it's humbling yourself, and then praying, seeking God's face. And I think this is a time for the people of God to seek God's face, to pray His presence. And so many people around the world have felt that this verse is relevant. 2 Chronicles 7:14. There's a whole movement called Unite 7:14. People praying at 7:14 in the morning, 7:14 in the evening. Literally millions of people uniting to pray, to seek God's face. And definitely, I think the response to this should always be to pray and just and the response in verse 15 is I'll see with my eyes and hear give attention with my ears. And if you think about God's face, He's listening to us, He's watching over us, He's attentive to our cry. That means that every prayer that's going up right now is being heard by God. And He also has a mouth, He speaks. And that's why I think the Bible is so important. I read the Bible on my knees because I want to humble myself before God and hear what He's saying. What are you saying? And every day I sense that God speaks through the Bible. He's promised to do that. Jesus said, people can't live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. So humble ourselves, pray, turn from the bad stuff. I don't think God sent the plague, but God gets our attention through the epidemic. And Jesus said, when people say, is this natural disaster? Is this from God? He said, no, this is not from God, but unless you repent. So it's like, no, this is not God's judgment. Otherwise, why would it be hitting the poor harder than the rich and the innocent, as well as those, So no, God didn't send it, but He's getting our attention, and He's saying, look at yourself, examine your heart, get right with God. Let's use this in that way to clean up our act. And He said, I'll forgive you. Well, of course, He has forgiven us because of Jesus. So there's no condemnation, but it's just get into the right relationship with God. It's all about relationship. Prayer is a relationship with God. Humble yourselves and pray, seek God's face, turn from your wicked ways, and then He promises He'll hear from heaven, forgive, and heal our land. And I think that's what our prayer is. Lord, heal this land. The world is broken, and we need to see God's healing, and in particular healing in terms of of people coming into a relationship with. How do we find healing? The same word for healing as salvation. It's finding salvation. And the amazing thing is the response. What is God doing right now? It's astonishing how many people are seeking God at this time. I cannot believe what's happening. Just say first what's happening with our Alpha.
Yeah, I mean, and I think it's happening all over the country, probably the world. But we've never had as many people doing Alpha at the moment. We didn't even realize that Alpha would work with Zoom. Just think it would be possible, if you're not meeting people, connecting with people. But I forget how many. We've
1,400 people, 1,400 people have signed up for Alpha at HTB. And we weren't even due to start for another 3 weeks.
Yeah. And our group seems to be working really well. And some of them said, most of them said they wouldn't have come on it unless there'd been the virus, that they didn't have the time or the inclination or whatever. But because of the virus, they put this time aside to do it. And it does seem like extraordinary opportunities for people to listen. People seem to be so open. I love the fact people are going around doing church on the streets. I don't know whether it happens in Southampton, but they've certainly been doing it in London and in Cheltenham, just opening front doors and people singing and joining in to hymns and prayers. When would that ever have happened before? It just wouldn't have done. But people are uniting and praying. There is a sort of spiritual hunger going on that is extraordinary.
And healing in relationships as well. I think one of the things it reveals this thing is how many marriages are under stress, and yet there's also a hunger to get healing in their marriage. So Nicky and Silla Lee, the marriage course is running all over the country. I suspect you run, I'm sure you run it in Southampton. Yeah. But people are signing up for the marriage course all over. Just on our course here, when normally the Lees would have 80 to 100 couples, they have over 4,000 couples doing the marriage course. What is that? Yeah. I don't know how many couples they got signed up to pre-marriage, but at least half of those would be totally outside of the church. Yeah. But people, this is so. What is God doing? He may be healing our relationships with Him, healing marriages, bringing healing to a society. Look what we've done with the homeless in London. They've all been put into hostels. Yeah. So why couldn't that happen? Look what's happened to our environment. I've never seen the sky so blue in London. The pollution has gone. I've never heard the birds sing. It's always the aeroplanes you hear. Now you can hear the birds. Is that a sign of what healing would mean for our environment? We were to heal our environment. So that's what God wants to do. He wants to heal our land, and that's what we're praying for. Lord, heal our land.
I want to ask, just before we finish, talking about prayer. I know for me, I love praying with people when I'm physically there. I love the kind of the worship and the band are playing, and I feel particularly in that kind of environment, I can connect with God really easily. That's always been a natural place for me. But I know for you guys, you have such I think a really inspirational prayer life in the way that with the Bible in 1 year and kind of setting aside, having the discipline to meet with God by yourself. I wonder just if you could give us just a few tips. Just obviously we're gathering together on Zoom and we can still pray together in groups, but it's not the same. And I think that I just wonder whether one of the things that God also wants us to teach us is how to rediscover that art of that audience of one, that kind of heart-to-heart connection. And just any tips that you can give us, any guidance would be great.
Well, John, I think you've got it wrong. Certainly for me, prayer is something I struggle with. I always want to be challenged. We were talking yesterday to Pastor Agu, who runs Jesus House, the huge Nigerian church, and they pray like nobody ever prays. And I was so challenged by him saying he spends the first 2 hours of the morning from 5 to 7 flat on his face praying before he reads the Bible. And I'm and then he goes to another prayer meeting in the afternoon where he joins in, and I was sort of, oh my goodness, Nicky and I looked at each other and said, are we Christians? That it just felt we're so far behind that. But as a result of that, I got up earlier this morning. So there must be something, you know, I think there is a sort of
And
challenge.
how do you pray when you're praying?
Well, you know, I mean, often I always like to walk before, because I think my concentration isn't that good. I mean, I do write down, you know, writing things down, journaling, it helps to a certain bit. But I do think it's hard when you're on your own. It's so easy to get distracted, sit at my desk and then start sort of fiddling around with things. And think, no, this is the time I am praying. Now what, you know, and then, you know, just to keep there, for me, I find it helpful to read a bit of the Bible and pray round that, pray the verses in or whatever. But I think don't give yourself a hard time. We can only be what we are. I'm delighted that Pastor Agu and all his church are praying for hours and hours. I do hope it rubs off on all of us. But I think to just try and pray, you know, in the day, and because we're on our own in the house, it's a little difficult. You've got little children always there. I think I am a bit more in the day just thinking, oh Lord, you know, what about this? How is that going to happen? And I think it's fine to sort of pray as you walk, you know, talk as you walk, all those things. And, you know, not to feel, oh, I should have had my 3 hours on my face this morning, but just to do what you can, and to know that there is a Heavenly Father that actually wants to listen to us, that actually is there and attentive, that actually is longing to hear our cries. And when I remember that, rather than, oh gosh, I should be praying now, sort of thing, that actually, what might he say today? What is he saying about this world that we're living in? I need to know. I want to know what's going on, and how am I going to find out unless I spend time with him? So I just think we need to keep encouraging each other that to pray and to go onto Zoom, but also to find the best way where you're not distracted, and whether that's walking or whether that's, I don't know, however you do that, locking yourself in a room without your children, trying to pray that way, whatever it is, every prayer counts. Every prayer is important, however big or small.
Brilliant. That's so. Anything to add, Nicky? I think that's absolutely brilliant, Pippa. And maybe just for those many in our church, but even many listening in today, never really engaged with the Bible before, new Christians, just done Alpha, kind of dipping their toe into church. So where to start? Kind of like a quick kind of where would we start if we'd want to try and read the Bible?
To read the Bible?
Yes, read the Bible
I always recommend people start with one of the Gospels. Start with like John's Gospel and just read a few verses. I love what Pastor Agu said about, I said to Pastor Agu, if you wanted to encourage anyone to just become a Christian, how to start praying, he said what he would do is he would talk to that person for about 3 minutes. And then he'd say to the person, now just talk to God like that. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you're worried about, just don't be religious about it. It's a relationship. Just chat to God for 3 minutes and start praying like that. Mm-hmm. And I thought, you know, after hearing it that he prays for 2 hours every morning, etc., it was such a relief to hear that's how he taught people how to start praying. So if you've never prayed before, start with 3 minutes. Mm. Maybe read a verse, read one verse, and then just talk to God for 3 minutes. Mm.
So helpful. Brilliant. Guys, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming and visiting again.
Southampton.
Yes. We were so impressed.
You're doing such an amazing
and all
job.
Your team.
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Really
Absolutely phenomenal. We were inspired by our time with you. Often talk about it. Yeah. And what you're doing with the football and the Saints, absolutely fantastic. Bridge the gap, all that stuff, really inspiring. We're learning so much from you.
Thank you so much, guys. And we're really sad. We're sad that we won't see you at the Leadership Conference or Focus, but we will see you soon, I'm sure. So thank you so much, guys. And we'll speak to you soon.